Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another video. Apologies that this one might have some atmospheric sounds of the birds chirping. It's really nice weather here in the UK today, so I do have the door of our conservatory open, but the birds are very loud here, so I apologise if that's kind of all you can hear instead of me. But it is June and June is Pride month. Pride is obviously something that is important all year round, but June is the month where there's a little bit of an extra push for celebrating the community, for raising more awareness and for talking more about LGBTQ plus issues. And I would really encourage you, if you are able to think about donating to an LGBTQ plus charity this month. That is what I will be doing as part of my reading challenge. Every month I donate to a different charity, and for June it will be an LGBTQ plus charity. So do check out my June reading journal video where you'll be able to see which charity I've chosen. So I wanted to think about making a video as part of kind of, you know, a little bit of celebration as part of this community, and I was trying to decide what it was that I could do, and I thought that I probably wanted it to be something reading related, and then I remembered a video idea that I had ages ago, which I finally thought it was time to film, which is, if you like Heartstopper, you might also like these books. So this is by no means a new idea. In fact, some of these recommendations that I'm going to be talking about are books I discovered through other videos where people recommended books that you might like if you like Heartstopper. So do make sure you do a little bit of a search on YouTube, because there are loads of other amazing videos of this type. But I do have some suggestions in this video that I've not seen anybody else talk about, so I thought that I could include them. And also I'm aware that I post book content on a planning channel, and therefore it's a slightly different community who watch my videos. Many of you may have watched Heartstopper on Netflix, and it might be that you've even read the graphic novel, but if you haven't, I would recommend you do. But if you have, you might still be looking for recommendations of other things that are similar to Heartstopper, so I thought this video might be interesting. I've never filmed a video like this before for my channel, so if you like it, I would really appreciate you letting me know down below, because I do have a few other ideas of ones I could do, so if there's something you like, I would happily film them. So a little bit of background on Heartstopper in case you are new to the Heartstopper world. So Heartstopper is a story by Alice Oseman, and it is a graphic novel. A graphic novel has basically kind of art as kind of the main parts of the story, and then it has some script around it. If you haven't read a graphic novel before but you really like visual media, I would really recommend graphic novels. They are so much fun, and a lot of the recommendations that I have today are graphic novels. They're really quick reads, they're really beautiful art. There's something really special about reading a graphic novel, so I really recommend them. Heartstopper is the story of Nick and Charlie. They are teenage boys at school, and Charlie is 1 year younger than Nick, but they get put in the same form together. This is actually a thing in the UK that happens, that you will get put in a form with people that are in, and form is like tutor group. I don't know if you have those. A homeroom in the States. And Nick and Charlie get put together even though they're in different years. They lead very different lives at school. Charlie is openly gay, which has resulted in some bullying that's happened to him. He has a very small but close-knit group of friends, but he doesn't really kind of socialise too widely with people at school because there were kind of issues surrounding it when he chose to come out within his school life. Nick is a very popular footballer at the school. He's a real sports personality. Everyone knows him, and everyone knows he's very openly heterosexual. But over the course of the story, these two spend a lot of time together, and some feelings develop which are more obvious to Charlie than they are to Nick. But this story is about Nick figuring out those feelings and what that might mean for him and his identity. I think that this book is so important. I have many friends that are part of the LGBTQ plus community. I'm 30, and you know, I'm part of a generation where a lot of people have been able to openly come out, but I've definitely seen some of my friends and people I know come out later than maybe they wanted to, because of the stigmas that surround coming out as something other than heterosexual. And I think that this book is so powerful in encouraging people to help them figure out who they are, what their sexuality is, and what their feelings are. And I just think this book is incredibly important, and I wish that it had been something that was around when I was at school, because I think it really would have helped a lot of my friends with figuring out some of their stuff. And even me, I think it really challenges some of the ways we think about things. I think this book is super important. I couldn't love it enough. I talk about it often on the channel. I'm a really big fan. It was made into a Netflix series last year, and season 2 is coming out, I think, quite soon. I think it comes out in the summer. Heartstopper at the moment has 4 graphic novels. We're getting a 5th one, the final one, I'm so sad, in November. So I'm excited to see where the story goes from here. So I hope that that has convinced you that if you haven't read Heartstopper already, stop this video now. Don't watch the rest of it. Go and read Heartstopper. You can pick it up in all major bookstores. You can pick it up for a little bit cheaper in the works as well if you're in the UK, because it's such a big story now. So I really, really, really recommend it. So that's the main thing I want to talk about. But if you have read Heartstopper and you're looking for some other recommendations, let me give you some ideas about what I think I would recommend you read. So the books that I'm going to be talking about that I think are similar to Heartstopper are for various different reasons. That might be because they feature a gay couple, which may include somebody figuring out their sexuality as part of that. It may be because I think the vibes are similar. If you've read Heartstopper, you'll understand there's a certain cozy, lovable vibe, and sometimes it's a vibe thing that means that the book is similar. Sometimes it's just the sort of general premise and the way that I think the story goes. Sometimes it's going to be kind of because of who Nick and Charlie are, and I think I've got books that kind of replicate them as characters, and then some of the recommendations are based on the kind of school setting that I think also give similar vibes. So a few different reasons that I could be recommending a book to be similar to Heartstopper. So first up, I'm going to recommend a graphic novel that I have seen recommended a lot as being something that people would like if they like Heartstopper, and this is Bloom by Kevin Panetta and Savannah Ganshow. I probably pronounced that correctly. This is an absolutely stunning, absolutely one of the prettiest graphic novels I have in terms of the art. It has this gorgeous turquoise, black and white colour scheme, which is just unbelievably stunning. It's like it's got some amazing scenery. I don't want to sort of flick through for too long because I don't want to make this video too long. It has these amazing set pieces. When I first read this, I just looked at it. I just wanted to be there. So I love this graphic novel for that reason. But the reasons I think it's similar to Heartstopper is that we have, I mean, Ari looks a little bit like Charlie. A story about 2 guys who end up in an unlikely relationship, and I think that that is very similar to Heartstopper. So we have Ari and Hector, and Ari works for his dad's Greek bakery, and he doesn't really want to work at the bakery, he just kind of does because he agrees to. He wants to run away and he wants to be a musician in a band. So he looks to find a replacement who can take over from him in the bakery so that he can leave, and they end up hiring Hector, who is an amazing baker. The 2 of them fall for each other over the course of just making bread and other baked goods, and that really gives me similar vibes to Heartstopper, that I feel like what can sometimes happen with a book as opposed to a graphic novel is that some of the falling in love happens off page to cover the passing of time. And Bloom, like Heartstopper, through the pages of the graphic novel, you really watch the characters fall in love. You really feel so a part of their relationship. And that really reminds me of Nick and Charlie. There's only one of these out right now, but I think we're getting the second one next year, hopefully. I would also say this one is really good value for money because it's huge. It took me a little while to read. And as I say, the art is stunning. I couldn't recommend this one enough. Next up, I have a manga recommendation, which is I Think Our Son Is Gay by Okura. This one is about Hiroki and his mum Tomoko, and Hiroki doesn't really sort of recognize that he is gay. He is really trying to squash his feelings about how he feels about other boys. He'll sort of publicly say he's really into girls, but his mum has definitely noticed that it's boys that he's interested in. But in the community that they live in, it's not very common to be openly gay, and so his mum is trying to figure out how she's going to support him to do this whilst also wanting him to discover his feelings on his own. I think that whilst so far anyway, I've read the first 2 in this series, and so far we haven't sort of got those openly gay moments. So we haven't got a character who's openly gay like Charlie. I think this one leans a little bit more similar to Nick, somebody who is publicly showing that they're heterosexual, but actually their feelings are something else. We've also got sort of this amazing supportive parent in the mum, but a less supportive parent in Hiroki's dad. So I think that it has very similar vibes for that reason. I also think Yuri, Hiroki's brother, is really similar to Tori in Heartstopper, really kind of sassy sibling. Yuri is, in my opinion, the peak sassy sibling, and Tori is very good for that as well in Heartstopper. So I think that you would probably really like this one. The art is equally beautiful. It is a manga, so get the joy of reading back to front. Next up, I have a couple of sport recommendations. So there is a fair amount of sport in Heartstopper because Nick plays, oh, it's rugby. I said football earlier. Nick plays rugby. So whilst these are more kind of focused on the sport, which Heartstopper isn't. There is a fair amount of sport in Heartstopper, and these are also LGBTQ plus stories. So first up we have Fence by C.S. Pascat, Joanna the Mad and Joanna Lafuente. This is one that is very often recommended, as is the next one I'm going to talk about, as if you like Heartstopper, you'll like this. So you may have seen this one recommended before, but this series is about a group of students who fence. That is basically what it's about. There's a couple of elite fencing academies that fight against each other. It is very fence focused. I've learned a lot about fence from reading this graphic novel, but we do have a lot of characters here who have very complicated feelings for each other. We have some characters that are openly gay, some characters that are bi. We have some characters who are really not sure what they feel or aren't sure if they feel anything. I think this graphic novel has really good representation for sort of multiple people within the community. I also think we have, it's never been explicitly really talked about, but I think we have a character in here who used to identify as a different gender and now identifies as another one. So yeah, I think this one has really good representation. The art is also really, really beautiful in this. That wasn't a great that wasn't a great one. But you can see we've got a lot of characters. We've got a lot of, there's a little bit of enemies to lovers in here if you like that kind of thing. And yeah, I think this series is really fun. I'm up to date with it now. We have 5 that are out currently. They do release quite slowly, so I'm very sad that we have kind of as many graphic novels as we're going to get right now, but I think these are a really, really interesting series and I really enjoyed my time with them, so I hope you do too. The other sporting graphic novel that I will recommend, that again is very highly recommended as one that if you like Heartstopper you'll like this, is Check Please by Ngozi Ukazu. This is a hockey romance about Bitty, who moves to Sandwell University and he's on the hockey team, even though really he's a bit more of a figure skater, but he actually is on the hockey team. And it's about his time on the hockey team, getting to grips with playing hockey, playing sort of like college level hockey. And he also, in that time, he never came out when he was at school because he didn't feel he could, but he does come out as openly gay while he's at university. And after he does that, he then kind of recognizes that maybe he has feelings for Jack, who is the captain of the team. So in this first one, I haven't read the second one yet, but in this one we are sort of following Bitty's journey at university. It does move very quickly. It has a really, really quick pace because Bitty kind of vlogs for a YouTube channel. So we follow Bitty kind of through, I think, over a year or maybe just the first year, but it moves very fast in terms of him kind of talking about his experiences. And it left us on a cliffhanger at the end of the first one, so I'm excited to see where the second one goes. But yeah, this is also, I feel, kind of similar to Heartstopper in that Jack is openly heterosexual and then we're sort of seeing whether he returns Bitty's feelings for him. My last graphic novel recommendation, but kind of leading into a little bit more if I think Nick and Charlie were a little bit more grown up, is Chef's Kiss by multiple people. Jarrett Melendez, Danica Breen, Hank Jones and Hassan Otsman El-Hau. Again, apologies for probably pronouncing those names really poorly. So this is a graphic novel about Ben, who has just finished university and he did an English degree. And if you've ever seen the musical Avenue Q, think the opening number of Avenue Q, like what do you do with a BA in English? This is that story. So Ben is trying to figure out what on earth he's going to do with his degree and he's really struggling to get a job. He ends up working in a kitchen, and the story is, this one's a little bit strange. There's this whole thing with a pig and if you've read it you'll understand, but there's this whole kind of bizarre part of this story. The pacing is sometimes a little bit off for me, and the focus is actually not so much on the romance. So Ben does have a relationship with a guy called Liam, and I wish we had just seen more of Liam. He was such a Nick, and I would have loved to see a little bit more of him. But unfortunately, it isn't just about that. It's also about Ben kind of settling into post-life university and having some fallouts with his friends. But that's really similar to Heartstopper as well. So I do think that this still has those Heartstopper vibes, but is kind of maybe, you know, looking at characters who are a little bit older, but that brings with it some interesting new challenges. Next up, I have a couple of adult novel recommendations that I think are maybe, of everything I'm going to talk about, the closest to Nick and Charlie recommendations, particularly the next one. So the one I really wanted to recommend as part of this video is Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. This is about my babes, Luke and Oliver, and I feel about these two the way I feel about Nick and Charlie. So Luke is in the public eye because his parents are both famous, particularly his dad, who is, think Billy Ray Cyrus. His dad is a returning pop star and starting to get back into having his career, but Luke has a really complicated relationship with his dad, and watching his dad become famous again makes him want to act out. So there's some sort of public photos that are taken of him, and they get in newspapers and stuff, and Luke works for a charity as a fundraiser, and loads of people then write in saying that they are not going to donate to the charity anymore because of Luke's public image. It's a little bit drastic, but so Luke's best friend Britt says to him, okay, you need to sort out your image, you need to be seen dating somebody respectable, why don't you date my best friend Oliver? And Oliver is a barrister, so in a job that people would consider reputable. Oliver also has things to gain by fake dating Luke, in that he has a complicated relationship with his parents and thinks that sort of having somebody to bring home might get them off his backs. So it's a little bit different to Heartstopper in that we've got two openly gay characters, but the mental health representation in this, I think, is a really, really good match for Heartstopper. One of my favourite parts of the Heartstopper series, particularly once we get to book 3 and 4, is the mental health rep, which I personally think is outstanding in the story. Charlie's anxiety is represented in a way that speaks to me on so many levels as somebody who lives with anxiety day to day. And both Luke and Oliver have mental health challenges in different ways, and this book is about them figuring out how on earth they can coexist with these two mental health challenges and be there for each other and deal with their own stuff. It is complicated, but it's funny and rich, and I really loved everything about this story. I very rarely laugh out loud at books. I really laughed at this, but I also cried, and I fell in love with these characters over and over again. There is a sequel to this which is called Husband Material. I didn't like the sequel as much, so I tend to just call this a book on its own. I'm going to pretend it's not part of a series, because I just didn't feel after this story I needed to see what happened with Luke and Oliver, and I didn't feel that the story carried on in the way I would have carried it on. So I just didn't really need that one, but I would really recommend this one. I think, yeah, of everything I have here, this is the one I think most gave me the similar feelings to Heartstopper. Next up, I have another kind of new adult recommendation that I think gives that kind of similar Heartstopper feeling. That is Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McCriston. This is being made into an Amazon Prime movie this year. I'm very excited for that. So what are the names of the characters? I read this one so long ago. Alex and Henry. Okay, so this is a really interesting premise for a story, in my opinion, because we have Alex, who is the son of the US president, who is the first female US president in this universe, and Henry, who is Prince of Wales, I think. And these two are, it is an enemies to lovers, but it's kind of dealt with in a kind of fake friendship way. And most people like enemies to lovers, just it's not my personal favourite trope. But this one I think is handled really well, because basically these two have a really public argument and they need some better press, and so they are forced to become sort of public fake friends. They end up sharing a lot of emails together and phone calls, hanging out with each other, and over the course of that they recognise that they have feelings for each other. I think that these characters have a lot of similarities to Nick and Charlie. They're also dealing with the sort of societal pressures that particularly Nick deals with in Heartstopper, and this is just such a fun story. It's such a unique premise. I really loved this when I read it. I would really recommend it. Light from outside has got like very bright. It looks like I've got some kind of really overexposed spotlight on, but I don't. Okay, so next up I'm going to recommend a couple of adult romances that don't have a male-male romance in them, but I think the first one I'm going to recommend does have LGBTQ plus rep in it, and these are, I would say, more on the vibes of if you love Nick, you will love these. So I am a Charlie, my partner is a Nick, okay? And I feel incredibly blessed to be loved by a Nick. Personality is what I wanted my whole life. And if you haven't read Heartstopper, what that is referring to is Nick is what I would say is a cinnamon roll defined person, in that he is unbelievably kind and lovely, sticks up for you when it's needed, is supportive, understands your mental health challenges. Nick is just like everything, and reading those stories was like reading my partner in a book. And so much media is about women going after bad boys. I blame Gilmore Girls for this, and I love Gilmore Girls, but it's all about going after a bad boy. There's so much narrative about going for a bad guy, and I've watched some of my closest friends ruin their lives for a little while because they've been with people that are, you know, a quote unquote bad guy. And I wish there was more out there that promoted being with a good person, whatever sexuality they are, because I think it would prevent a lot of unhealthy relationships, and also make you feel like that can be the kind of person you want to go after, because sometimes it can feel like, oh, I'm settling with someone who's maybe would deem, that was a really loud bird, being with someone who's maybe deemed, I don't know, a little bit boring, maybe is publicly the wording, and actually you are looking for somebody stable who's going to support you, who's going to be there for you. And preach. Anyway, so these books are kind of leaning into that. If you love Nick, you will love these. So first up we have Hang the Moon by Alexandria Bellfleur. This is the second in a 3-part series, which is, the series is called Written in the Stars, and the first book is also called Written in the Stars. This whole trilogy is an LGBTQ plus trilogy. So in the first and the third books we have a sapphic romance, so maybe worth checking out. I didn't love the first one and the third one as much as this one, only because I just felt like the way that the characters were getting together just wasn't really the story I was looking for. The pacing didn't quite work for me. But this one I really enjoyed, because this one was a second chance romance about Annie and Brendan. And Brendan has kind of been in love with Annie for a really long time. And Annie is kind of finally at a point where she might be available, but still isn't quite available. And Brendan has to try and convince her not to give up on love. And in the process of that, convinces Annie to fall in love with him. I know that this story is not going to be for everybody. It's very fluffy in many ways, but I kind of always knew this would be the one that I would love of the trilogy. And to me, the reason for that is because Brendan is so much like a Nick. He is such a cinnamon roll. He's so lovely. He's friendly. He's like a sort of big puppy dog. Just a genuinely really nice guy, but super sexy, and really kind of supportive of the stuff that Annie's kind of dealing with, and I just really liked it. So yeah, I would really recommend this if you're a fan of Nick. This next one is, I don't know if I think that Gus is a Nick, but this one is maybe another good example of really good mental health rep in a story, which is Beach Read by Emily Henry. I'm such a big fan of Emily Henry. I've given this one and You and Me / People We Meet on Vacation 5 stars, and I gave Book Lovers 4 stars. And I think my reading experience of Book Lovers suffered from the fact I just read Beach Read, and Beach Read broke me. Beach Read was like the story that was written for me, and so I think Book Lovers suffered a little bit as a result of that, and I haven't read Happy Place yet. So Beach Read is about Gus and January, and they're both writers, and they both are kind of in this like cabin in a lakeside town to write some books, and they're really both struggling to write their books, and so they end up kind of chatting to each other and encouraging each other to be, they kind of motivate each other to get further in their stories. The blurb of this does not truly talk about how much of this story is actually about dealing with mental health. Both Gus and January's, but particularly Gus's, they're both going through so much, and they both really support each other through that in the way that Nick and Charlie support each other with what they're dealing with. So this is very grown up Nick and Charlie. It's not a LGBTQ plus romance, but if you like mental health rep, I think that this is a really good example of it done exceptionally well. Be prepared to cry. I sobbed for the last third of the book, I think. I have a vlog up on my channel if you want to watch it, but yeah, this book was a hard read but a necessary read, and I absolutely loved it. Then I have a couple of sort of just honorary mentions that are more if you kind of like the school setting. These are books that I liked if you want to read a little bit more. These are both in American schools, so I don't really know whether they are good recommendations for this, but if you are an adult who likes to read YA, these are YAs I really enjoyed in the same way that I enjoyed Heartstopper. So first up we have one of my favourite books ever, which is My Mechanical Romance by Alexin Farrell-Fulmuth, who is Olivia Blake, who writes the Atlas 6. Olivia Blake is Alexin's pen name. This book is about Belle and Tao. Belle moves to a new school. She's really struggling to fit in, and her teacher recommends that she joins the robotics club, and there she ends up meeting Tao, who is the most popular boy in school, bit of a Nick, most popular boy in school, incredibly smart, really well liked, and also sporty in the way that Nick is, and he is the sort of head of the robotics team. And there's a little bit of kind of enemies to lovers in here, but I would say it's more academic rivals to lovers, where Tao doesn't really want Belle to be part of it, but she's sort of fighting through her own issues with self-belief and her own mental health challenges to kind of be a woman in STEM. And I think that this is another book that's an example of, I would have found this book a really, really positive read when I was at school. I made a decision quite early on in my academic career that I was going to give up all kinds of STEM and be a creative girl. And in part, that was because I didn't think I was clever enough. And I think if I had read a book like this, it would have helped me to feel like I should have pushed through some of that. I got pretty good grades in my STEM subjects, and I didn't necessarily need to give up as early as I did. So I think this book is really important for that, and kind of gives those similar messagings that Heartstopper does, and very much has the school setting. So if you like that kind of thing, I think you might like this one. We then have The Upside of Falling by Alex Light. This is a fake dating romance about Becca and Brett. Becca doesn't believe in true love, but she gets teased by her former best friend for never having experienced love. She then impulsively pretends she's with somebody and then has to figure out how on earth she's going to deal with that. Luckily, Brett overhears this and he decides to step in and pretend to be her boyfriend. And it's just a really cute fake dating school romance. I really liked this one. Brett was another example of, you know, I think, again, he's quite similar to Nick. He's a bit of a jock, and he, you know, really wanted to do what was best for Becca despite what was best for him. And he does deal with some of his own mental health stuff during this. He goes through a quite complicated dip as part of this story, which is impressive, the length of the book. I thought this was just a really fun YA fake dating trope in a school. I don't think you could ask for more. That is otherwise kind of everything that I wanted to recommend for this video. You know, if you're now going to go and read any of these, if you've read any of them, do you agree? Do they give you the Heartstopper vibes? And as I say, this is the first of these types of videos that I'm filming on my channel, so if you did enjoy it, I would really love to hear from you to kind of let me know if this is something that you would like to see a little bit more of. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a like, and if you haven't already, I would love it if you would subscribe. In the description, I will have links to my Instagram and my Goodreads if you want to check out any more content from me. Otherwise, I'll see you in my next video. Bye!